All right, we'll say good morning. Let's begin. Today's daf is Kuf Dalid 104. We are picking up at 103b. Did we do the Mishnah yesterday? Yeah, we did the Mishnah. Okay, good. So we'll pick up from the Gemara, we'll say. So remember again, the Mishnah introduced us. So we're picking up 103b, Kuf Gimel Amud Beis, about 8 lines up from the bottom, right at the start of the Gemara. So remember again, the Mishnah taught us about the idea. We tried in yesterday's daf, we spoke about the Kohanic entitlement to the hides. Now the Mishnah is talking about what happens if there's a psul, what happens if there's some type of psul in the carbon. So the Mishnah seemed to say that any psul that occurred before the hides are removed, so the Kohanim don't get the hides. However, if the carbonic psul occurred after the hides were removed, then ultimately again the Kohanim do get the hides. So Rabbi Chanina's Kanakonim said, I never saw in all of my days, I never saw a hide being taken out to be burned. So Rabbi Akiva learned out something, we'll see this in the Gemara. Rabbi Akiva made a halachic inference, ultimately again, based on the Mishnah. Based on the Mishnah. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, Kol shelo zocha hamizbeach b'vsara, lo zocha kohanim ba'ora. So we'll say the Gemara says as follows, that ultimately, any time that the Mizbeach has not acquired the meat of any time that the Mizbeach has not acquired the meat of the carbon, lo zachu kohanim ba'ora. Ultimately, again, the Kohanim do not get the hide. So both say that's just the principle of the Mishnah. Va'afa gav da'afshet heloar kodim zrika. Both say, in other words, what this sounds like is, even if the hide was removed prior to zrika, but then for some reason there's some type of psul in the meat itself, the Kohanim do not go ahead and get the hide. Money. Well, so whose opinion does this reflect? Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimoni. It reflects the Rabbi Shimon. Da'amar ein hadam meratza al ha'ar bifnei atzmo. Because he says, Rabbi said that ultimately again, blood does not atone the zrika. The zrika essentially does not create the effectiveness for the hide by itself, which Rabbi say is another way of saying that the hide, that zrika permits the meat and the hide together. So if the zrika is not going to permit the meat, then the zrika ultimately again is not going to permit the hide as well. If you look at Rashi just says from a moment over, Mani Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, it's the last of the short lines in Rashi. Da'amr lekamon ein hadam meratza al or chalutz bifnei atzmo below basar. Kigon nifsal basar vein hadam meratza alav afa or lo yotze midei meila. So we'll say, so Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon holds the halacha l'maisa, so the blood affects atonement for the meat and the hide together. So if the meat is disqualified, the hide is disqualified. So the Gemara says, so that sounds like that's the opinion of the Mishnah. Say emos seifa bi. Look at the end of the Mishnah. Kalakachim shira ben psul kodim ef shaitan ein arosein lakohanim. Supposed to look at the seifa that says all karbanos where a psul ultimately occurs before the hide is removed, then the hide doesn't go to the Kohanim. La'achrev shitan, but if the psul occurs after the hide is removed, the Kohanim, ultimately again the hide does go to the Kohanim. Supposed to whose opinion does that reflect? Asa'an l'Rebbe. That seems to reflect the view of Rebbe. Da'amar dam hadam miratza al ha'ar bifnei atzmo, who says that ultimately again the blood affects atonement for the meat, for the hide by itself, which Rabbi means that even if the meat is disqualified, l'maisa again the hide could still be fine for the Kohanim. So whose opinion does that reflect? That's Rebbe. Reisha Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Sefer Rebbe. You're going to say at the beginning of the Mishnah reflects Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. The Sefer is Rebbe. We'll say now generally we don't like to do that. We like to have the Mishnah reflect one view. Amar Abaye made the Sefer Rebbe. He Reisha Nami Rebbe. So we'll say Abaye says no. If the Sefer is going to be Rebbe, then ultimately again the Reisha is going to be Rebbe as well. Umo the Rebbe Shein Hefshit Kodem Zrika. And Rebbe just holds, we'll say just as a matter of procedure, that in general removal of the hide does not occur before Zrika. Rava Amar Rava says Midrash Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Sefer Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. Rava says the opposite. Rava says no. Make both parts of the Mishnah reflective of the view of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. To which the Gemara says Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon my kodem hefshit umay top of kofdal and my achar hefshit. So we'll say ultimately again, what does Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon? How does he interpret the phrase before the hide was removed and after the hide was removed? Kodem sheniro lahavshit. Achar shenir lahavshit. We'll say what it means is before it was fit to be removed and after it was fit to be removed. Fine, so two different ways of interpreting the Mishnah. Both of these opinions, however, again have one theme or one opinion, one author for both the Reisha and the Seifa. So my Rebbe, my Rabbi Elazar Shimon. So we'll say now the Gemara says, you're referencing the opinions of Rebbe and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon. What are their respective opinions? So here we go. Disanya. Rebbe Omer. Hadam miratza al ha'ar bifnei atzmo. So we'll say Rebbe holds that the dam, the sprinkling of the blood, literally affects atonement, but it really means affects usage of the hide by itself, which I will say means as follows: that if there is a proper zrika, even if the meat itself ultimately again is invalid, the zrika will still allow for the hide to be valid. That's what it means. So in other words, according to Rebbe holds that halacha l'maisa, the fate of the halachic fate of the hide and the meat are not necessarily intertwined. So you could have a case where the sacrificial meat is invalid, but the hide will still be usable for the kohanim. Ukishum basar, but I will say when the hide is together with the meat. In other words, if the hide has not been removed. So Rebbe Hozer will say again, say if the hide has been removed and zrika has been done, even if the meat subsequently becomes invalid, the hide will still remain valid. However, that is only when the hide has been removed from the meat. Ukishum basar, but if the hide is together with the meat, then nolad bo psul ben kodim zrika ben la'achar zrika hari huki yotzebo. But we'll say if the hide is still with the meat, then what? Then halacha l'maisa, if the meat becomes disqualified, then the hide becomes disqualified as well. Rabbi Elazar Shimon Omer ein hadam meratza la'ar bifnei atzmo. So Rabbi Elazar Shimon says no, there is no such thing as the zrika affecting usage of the hide by itself. Rather, again, the hide, the usage of the hide or the entitlement of the hide is directly wrapped up with the effectiveness of the meat. Our effectiveness is really the word, the kashrus of the meat. If the meat is sacrificially valid, then the hide will go to the kohanim. If the meat is not sacrificially valid, then the hide does not go to the kohanim. Kishum basar, and when the hide is with the meat, no lerbo psul kodem zrika harihu kiyotzebo. So we'll listen to this. And when the hide is with the meat, if the invalidation occurs, if the validation of the meat occurs before zrika, so ultimately again the hide is like the meat. Achar zrika hurtza basar sha'achos yafshitenu va'orol lakarbo. So listen to this. It's actually quite interesting. If, however, again the psul only occurs after zrika, so we'll say, see, here's what happens. If zrika was done, so Rabbi Elazar Shimon says that means there was a moment in which the meat was kosher, meaning sacrificially kosher. Meaning once you have a moment that the meat was sacrificially kosher, then what? That means the hide was kosher, and therefore the hide could be given to the kohanim themselves. To which the Gemara says, "Lema, but Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua Kamiflagi." We'll say perhaps the machlokes Rabbi and Rabbi Elazar is the same machlokes as Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. Because what Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yoshua say? Here we go. Va'asisa olasecha habasar v'hadam. We'll say, so the pasuk says, "You shall perform your olos, your karbanos, habasar v'hadam." The meat as well as the blood. The meat as well as the blood. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, obviously, what the pasuk is doing over here is what? Is linking the meat, the basar, together with the dam. So what's the pshat? To which the Gemara says, Rabbi Shua Omer, im ein dam, ein basar, im ein basar, ein dam. So we'll say, ultimately, Rabbi Yeshua understands this to mean what? Rabbi Yeshua says that if there is no blood, there is no meat, and if there is no meat, there is no blood. Which I will say essentially means that if there's no blood, there's no meat. Which means what? If there's no zrika, then ultimately again the meat does not become permitted. In basar in dan, I will say if the meat somehow becomes invalid, the zrika is also compromised, as we'll see in just a moment. Rabbi Eliezer Omer dam afapi she'in basar. Rabbi Eliezer Omer dam afapi she'in basar. So Rabbi Eliezer says that the dam could be effective even if there's no basar. Shene emar v'dam zivachecha yishpach im kain ma tamulomar v'asisa olasecha habasar v'hadam. So we'll say if that's the case, yishafech. I'm sorry. So ultimately, again, im kain ma tamulomar v'asisa olasecha habasar v'hadam. If that's the case, ultimately, then what's the need of the pasuk when it says you shall do your olos, the basar and the dam lomer lecha, to teach you as follows: ma dam bizrika af basar bizrika. Well, this is actually very interesting. He learns it out to teach me that just like dam is applied to the mizbeach with zrika, so too the basar, the meat, is put on the mizbeach with zrika. What does that mean? Halamarata sherevach yesh ben kevesh lemizbeach. Also, what this teaches me is that we actually saw this earlier in the Masechta, that there was a space between the top of the ramp and the top of the Mizbeach, which meant that halacha l'maisa, when the Kohen got to the top of the ramp, he actually threw the meat onto the Mizbeach. That's the nature of the juxtaposition between habasar v'hadam. Just like the dam is applied bezrika, so too the meat is put on the mizbeach bezrika. But what do you see from here? So, right, halamata sherevach yesh ben kevesh lemizbeach. So lema man da amar hurtza. So let's talk about this in just a moment. So say that ultimately, according to the one who says that the hide is fit, right? Hurtza in this case means the hide. That the hide is fit even when the basar is pasul, holds like Rebbe Lazar. Umanda amar lo hortza k'Rabbi Yoshua, I should say Rabbi Eliezer. Umanda amar lo hortza k'Rabbi Yoshua, and the one who holds ultimately again that if the meat is invalid, the hide is invalid, holds like Rabbi Yoshua. To which the Gemara says, well, maybe not. Alibud Rebbe Lazar, according, I should say Rabbi Eliezer, Alibud Rabbi Eliezer, kuli amalo pligi. But say according to Rabbi Eliezer, everybody agrees that what? Everyone agrees that ultimately, again, that zrika is matir the hide, even if the meat itself is invalid. Ki pligi, so where do they argue? Aliba Rabbi Yoshua, and according to the opinion of Rabbi Yoshua, how so? Man da amar lo hurtza ki Rabbi Yoshua. So we'll say the one who says ultimately, again, that lo hortza means that if the meat is ineffective, if the meat is pasul, if the meat is invalid, or I should say, if zrika doesn't affect the usage of the meat, it doesn't affect the usage of the hide. Rabbi Yoshua, man damar hortza amar lacha. So we'll say the one who says that even if the meat is invalid, ultimately again the zrika can validate the use of the hide. Amar lacha, he will tell you, ad kan lo kam Rabbi Yoshua hasam ela bebasar deleka psei delekohanim. So we'll say, he'll say, according to Rabbi Yoshua will tell you, up until now, we're only talking about a case of basar, where the absence of the basar, even if the basar is invalid, it doesn't represent such a loss to the kohanim. It represents loss to the mizbeach. Aval or diika pseida kohanim. But also when it comes to the hide, where again, if it becomes invalid, it does represent a loss to the kohanim. Afilu Rabbi Yoshua moda. Even Rabbi Yoshua agrees that even if the meat is invalid, halacha l'maisa, again, the hide will still, as long as there's rika. We say differently. As long as there's rika, even if the meat is invalid, the hide will still go to the kohanim. Midi dahavi adiavad. Because ultimately, according to Rabbi Yeshua, it'll be a case like bidiavad. Which bidiavad are we talking about? Tisnan. Here we go. Nitma basar nifsal. Oshiyatza chutz lekilayim. We'll say if the basar sacrificially became tummy, or it became pasul some way, or it was taken outside of the confines of the Beis Hamikdash. In all of these cases, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Yizrok. Rabbi Eliezer says ultimately again it has to be thrown out. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Lo, I should say, sorry, Zidu Zrika, right? Yizrok. In other words, Zidu Zrika will say even though the meat has been removed in a way that compromises it, you still do the Zrika. In other words, we'll say even if the meat itself is going to be non-consumable, if the blood ultimately is there, you can still do the Zrika. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Lo Yizrok. Umod Rabbi Yeshua Shimzara Kurtza. And Rabbi Yeshua says, no, you shouldn't do Zrika. But Rabbi Yeshua says, Bidi Evet, if you did do this Zrika, ultimately, again, the carbon works. So we'll say, the Gemara is suggesting is that according to Rabbi Yeshua holds that even in a case where you shouldn't do this Zrika, if you did this Zrika Bidi Evet, it works. Rabbi Yeshua would say also in the case of the hide, so we'll say, so even though, again, ideally we would like the hide to be given to the Kohanim in a case where the meat is sacrificially valid as well. But the Eved, even if the meat was compromised, we would still go ahead and give the hide to the Kohanim. Good. So we'll say, so says the Gemara. There's okay, you know what, maybe we'll come back to a little bit afterwards. Fine, there's some interesting halacha, maybe we'll save it for the next sugya. So Rabbi Chanina is kind of quiet. We'll say first why land kuftal and well. So remember again, so what we saw over here is as follows. That halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah seems to say that if the psul in the kachim occurs before the hide was removed, so the hide doesn't go to the kohanim. If the psul occurs after the hide was removed, the psul goes to the kohanim. Just follow the progression. Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim says, I never saw a hide which was burned. In other words, I never saw a hide which was discarded. I never saw it. Rabbi Akiva says, what do you see from here? Rabbi Akiva wants to suggest that based on this, that even if, let's say again, they removed the hide from the Bechor, and then they discovered that the Bechor was a treifa, which means that the Bechor had a pre-existing condition that was already there at the time that they removed the hide. You see from here that the hide still goes to the Kohanim. Otherwise, again, Rabbi Chanina ben Eskana Kohanim must have seen other hides that were destroyed. So just to follow this flow. So again, Rabbi Kiva says the fact that Rabbi Chanina Eskana Kohanim never saw a hide being destroyed indicates to us that even if, by let's say a Bechar, they find it to be a treifa, as long as the hide was already removed, the Kohanim get to keep it, even though the karban was puzzled from the beginning. So the Chachamim say, Lo ra'inu lo ino raya. So the Chacham essentially discount Rabbi Chanina Eskana Kohanim's eyewitness testimony. They say, we don't care what you did see or what you didn't see. Maybe it was on the day that you were sick and you weren't in the Beis HaMikdash. That was the day that they burnt hides. In other words, we can't just simply rely on your eyewitness testimony. Rather, again, he says, halacha l'maisa, in that case of Bechar, we would in fact take out the hide to be burnt. Okay, so now we're going to break this apart. So Rabbi Chanina Eskana Kohanim. So the Gemara says, v'lo, is that Rabbi Chanina Eskana Kohanim never saw hides being taken out to be burnt? Vari parim hadasafim, musrim hadasafim. Also, we're going to see this in the next Mishnah. There are certain karbanos which were burnt whole. When I say whole, there are certain sacrificial parts that were taken out, but the animal was not really cut up into pieces. For example, the parim hanesrafim and the sirim hanesrafim, which we learned about extensively in Zevachim, but also in Harius, right? So again, these animals were burnt whole with their hides. To which the Gemara says, no, the mitzvah no kamrinan. We're not talking, Rabbi Chanina Eskana Kohanim was not talking about where the obligation was to burn it with the hide. He was talking about in a case of psul, in a case of invalidation, he never saw an invalidated hide burned. Obviously, in cases where the burning of the hide was mandated, of course he saw that. So the Gemara says, Hari kodim hefshet v'kodim zriga. So says the Gemara, what about cases where ultimately, again, where the hide became puzzle, prior to being removed or prior to... In other words, there are cases, Rabbi Osai, where a carbon becomes invalidated, and again, as we saw in the Mishnah, everyone seems to agree that if the carbonic invalidation occurs before the hide is removed, then the hide is burned. That never happened all the days of Rabbi Chanina Eskana Kohanim, to which the Gemara says, Chalutz Kamiran. What he meant was, he never saw a hide which was already removed become disqualified. So the Gemara says, Ay, vaha, Ika achar hefshet v'kodim zrika. To which the Gemara said, but 1 second, what about the case of a hide, Rabbi Osai, that was removed, but then a disqualification occurs before zrika, which Rabbi Osai, according to the Mishnah, sounds like would be invalid. To which the Gemara answers, the Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon da Amra ein hadameratza ala arbifnei atzmo. So he must hold, according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon holds, will say that what? That the blood is not miratza for the hide by itself, and therefore, again, it's only if the meat becomes valid that the hide becomes valid. So as such, in that kind of case, the hide itself was never valid to begin with. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Chanina could Rabbi Svirle. So I'll say, ultimately, again, you'd have to say that what? Rabbi Chanina holds like Rabbi. V'bai Sema, Afilu Tukma Kibbutz Rabbi Shimon Modeh Rabbi Shein Hefshet Kodim Zrika. Because as we said before, even if you want to set it up with Rabbi Shimon, we already said that Rabbi holds that just supposed to say as a matter of practice. So generally, the hide was not removed before Zrika. So we'll say, remember, all we're trying to do is as follows. Rabbi Chanina Eskana Kohanim makes a very dramatic statement. What's his dramatic statement? That I never saw a case of a hide which was disqualified. So it says, the Gemara just says, impossible. What does that mean? Never in all of your years as serving as the Kohen, as in the Beis HaMikdash, you never saw once a disqualified hide. So what we're trying to figure out is how that could possibly be. So now the Gemara suggests as follows. We'll say, what about the case, ultimately, again, of where the animal is found to be a treifa in its intestines? Then we'll say, now, that's the case. If you look at Rashi, it's 4 lines down in the wide lines of Rashi. So we'll say, what happens if you find a psul in the kishkas? And I will say, now, bepashtos, that would be something that you would find before the animal was flayed. Because remember, again, what would often happen is you would go ahead and you check the animal, you cut it open, take out the emur and whatever the sacrificial parts are. All of that happens before the hide is taken off. So we'll say, what about a case where you would go ahead and you'd find the psul in the kishkas, in the intestines? So we'll say, I would think that would be a case where what? Now the entire animal is puzzle, including what? Including the hide. So that would be a case of where you would see the hide being destroyed. Because Savar Nim says straight from Neme Ayim Miratza. So this is actually quite interesting. So ultimately, Becharinas Kana Konim holds that what? That halacha lemaisa, that in that kind of case, so even if they discovered a psul in the name Ayim Miratza, Rashi says Miratza, Hovelo Hukir Pisulo Kodem Hefshit. So we'll say, indeed, in a case where let's say the hide was removed before that psul was discovered, Inachinami, if the psul is discovered before the hide is removed, then the hide will be destroyed. But if for some reason that psul was not discovered until after the hide was removed, in other words, we'll say, you could remove the hide technically whenever you want after shchita. As a matter of practice, the Gemara seems to say that generally they didn't remove the hide until after zrika. But it sounds like on a technical level, as soon as you do shchita, you could remove the hide right then and there if you want to. So at a technical level, if you removed the hide before ultimately, again, they discovered the psul and the b'nei me'ayim in the intestines, the Gemara suggests, that it's according to Becharinas Ganakone, maybe even Rebbe, that the hide would still be kosher. To which the Gemara says, Dekanami diktani, Amar Rabbi Akiva, midvar lamanu shamafshet esabachav v'nimtzo treifa she'osu hakohanim ba'oro. So we'll say, and again, we could infer that according to Becharinas Ganakohanim, that enachinami, if you removed the hide from the animal prior to discovering anything in the b'nei me'ayim, in the intestines, that indeed the animal would still be kosher. To which the Gemara says, you're right, because again, based on the statement of Rabbi Akiva, we learned that if you cut and you remove the hide from a bechar, and then you discover that it's a treifa, that the hide is still kosher. So we'll say this has to be a case where you removed the hide before the discovery of the animal's invalidation. Shmamina indeed see this is the case. If that's the case, ultimately, again, what is Rabbi Akiva coming to add on? To which the Gemara says, Hakamash Malan, Afilu Bigvulin. Ultimately, and it's coming to teach us that this is true even outside of the Beis HaMikdash. And we'll say, now, what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. That Afilu Bigvulin is actually quite interesting. It's about 8 lines up from the bottom, 10 lines up from the bottom. Tamar Afilu Bigvulin, Bechar Balmum Hanishchat. We'll say, listen to this. The halacha is a kohen gets a Bechar animal. Now, under normal circumstances, if it's a regular Bechar, so it has sacrificial sanctity, it's offered up in the Beis HaMikdash, and the meat belongs to the kohen. What happens if the Bechar has a Balmum? So we'll say the halacha is that ultimately can be shechted by the kohen even outside of the Beis HaMikdash. Even outside. So look what Rashi says over here. Bechar Balmum, Hanishchat b'Medina al mumo. V'lo etira akasav ela ba'achila, ki dichsib, b'sharecha tochlanu. Aval imeis ora aser, v'taon kvura. So we'll say, listen to this. So the kohen has a Bechar Balmum. He's shechting it ultimately again in his house, wherever, outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So Rabbi Akiva says as follows. Rabbi Akiva says, in a case, the heicha delo nikar treifaso ad la'achar hefshit. So we'll listen to the following situation. So let's say again, the kohen shechts the bechar that is a balmum. He discovers that ultimately, again, the animal is a treifa. But so what's the halacha of an animal as a treifos? So he has to bury it. In other words, he can't just throw it away because it's a bechor. So even though it's a balmum, he has to bury the animal. But let's say again the treifa wasn't discovered until after what? Ad la'achar hefshit, until after the hide was removed. Shera shchitasav efshita oro kilo nizrak damo b'mikdash v'nimtza treifa la'achar hefshit. So we'll say Rabbi Akiva is coming to add in this case that even in the case of a bechor balmum, if the kohen ultimately again removed the hide prior to discovering the fact that the animal was a treifa, ultimately again he would be permitted to go ahead and keep the hide. Amr Rabbi Chanina, Amr Rabbi Chiya bar Abba, Amr Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Rabbi Akiva. So we'll say Rabbi Chiya bar Abba says in Rabbi Yochanan that the halacha follows Rabbi Akiva. Va'af Rabbi Akiva lo Amr Ella kishetira mumcha. And I will say even Rabbi Akiva only said his particular shita when ultimately again I will say it was a mumcha, it was an expert who determined ultimately again that it is a true mum. So what that means is, in order for a bachar not to be offered up in the Beis Hamikdash, it has to be certified as a Baal Mum. In order to be certified as a Baal Mum, what's the Rabbi Akiva says that what do you need? You need a mumcha. Everybody's got to have a mum guy, right? You have to have a mumcha, ultimately, again, who certifies it as a Baal Mum. In that case, Rabbi Akiva holds that if after the shechita, the hide was removed, and then it was found to be a treifa, even though the animal itself has to be buried, the hide will still be permitted for kohanic use. So the Gemara says, and the halacha also follows the divrei chachamim, the approach of the chacham. So we'll say, so halacha l'maisa, what do we take from this sugya? So I'll read to you. So the Rambam in Perek Gimel, so the Gemara itself gives us two pieces of halacha l'maisa. Halacha Rabbi Akiva and halacha kechacham. So we'll say, here we go. So the Rambam, this is in Hilchos Bechoros, Perek Gimel halacha Yud. Bechor, shenimtza treifa. So I'll say, if the bechor was found to be a treifa, which Rav Osam again, remember, treifa means animal has a condition from which it will imminently die. So remember again, imminent is machlokes, let's assume within 12 months, such an animal is not fit for consumption. So if the animal was shechted and found to be a treifa, im tamimhu v'nimtza treifa achar shuv shata'ar, so we'll say if the animal presented as a tamim, but it was only found to be a treifa after the hide was removed, ha'or yisaref kimoshe be'arna behilchos psuli hamukdashin, va'basar yikaver. So we'll say, so the halacha is that if the animal presented as a tamim, right, and ultimately again the treifa was found after the hide was removed, the hide must be destroyed and the meat must be buried. V'im b'mumon yishchat habasar yikaver v'yahanu ha'kohanim ba'oro v'shenishchat al pi mumcha. So this is the halacha specifically by bechor. By bechor, so halacha by bechor, we'll say ultimately is that if there was a proper bechor that we were thought was a tamim, but was shechted and found to be a treifa, even if the hide was already removed, halacha l'mais, it has to be buried or has to be burnt, has to be destroyed, and the meat itself is buried. But however, again, if the bechor was already known to be a Baal Mum and therefore being shechted outside of the Beis Hamikdash, the halacha is that ultimately, again, the hide is permitted for kohanic use. The meat, of course, will not be because it's a treifa animal, but l'maisa, again, the hide will be permitted. Good. Says the Mishnah. So we're not finished with hides yet. So suppose now we're going to go back to the sugya and make reference to that which we said before. So so we'll say what happens with these animals which are burnt whole, right? So remember, so we'll say when they are burnt. Now, nisrafim kimitzvasan means that they're being burnt in accordance with their normative procedure. So what's the halacha? Nisrafim bebeis hadashan. So we'll say this Mishnah now is going to speak about that there were different locations where they used to burn sacrificial animals. So remember again, Parim HaNisrafim and Sirim HaNisrafim are the major sin offerings, like Par Ha'elam Davar Minat Tzibor, where the Tzibor commits a major Aveira, Kohen Gadol commits an Aveira, King commits an Aveira, Sanhedrin gives erroneous instruction. So so we'll say these are Parim HaNisrafim, Sirim HaNisrafim. So what's the halacha? Bizman she'en Nisrafim kimitzvasan, when they are being burnt in accordance with halacha, in other words, when they're kosher offerings and being burnt in a normative way, Nisrafim bebeis hadeshan. We'll say they are burnt in the Beis Hadeshan. Where is the Beis Hadeshan? Rashi points out over here, Chutz Ligimel Machanos, outside of the three camps. So we'll say, just to understand how outside of three camps, so in the desert I understand that, right? There's Machane Shechina, that's where the Mishkan was, Machane Levia around it, and Machane Yisrael around that. How exactly do the three camps play out in Eretz Yisrael? So we'll say, if you imagine the following, the Harabayis, ultimately, again, is Machane Shechina. Yerushalayim is Machane Levia. And I'll say that differently. So the Beis HaMikdash is Machane Shechina. The Harabayis is Machane Levia. And ultimately, Yerushalayim, the city, is Machane Yisrael. Therefore, again, the Beis Hadeshan we're going to see was outside of the walls of Yerushalayim. So these karbanos, these offerings, which had to be burnt whole, were taken to the Beis Hadeshan, which was outside of Yerushalayim proper. So says the Gemara, Omitamin begadim, Furthermore, again, if you're involved in the burning of these sacrifices, your clothing become tamei. Now, if something happened ultimately again to these animals, and they're invalid, and therefore again they're not being burnt in their normal fashion, then what? Nisrafim bebeis habira. The Rabbi said they are burnt in the beis habira. Where is the beis habira? Rashi says, Pamim ba'azara, Pamim b'harabai. Sometimes it was in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. Sometimes it was just somewhere on the harabayis. Ve'inan metamin begadim. And I will say, if the carbon is invalid, ultimately again, it will not be metame begadim. It doesn't go ahead and convey tumah to clothing. Amud beis. Hayusovlin oso bemutos. So let's listen to this. When they were taking out these carbonos, ultimately again to this place that we call the Beis Hadeshen, which was this place outside of Yerushalayim to be burnt, they would carry it on poles. They would carry the animal on poles. So the Gemara says, that we're going to see, ultimately it's two poles, 4 people, right, 2 to each pole, and the poles were parallel to each other. So how you solve them also b'motos. Yatsu harishon chutz l'chomos ha'azara, v'achronim lo yatsu, harishonim etamin begadim, v'achronim einim etamin begadim ad sheitzu. So this is actually very interesting. So we just said before that those who are involved with the burning of this carbon, ultimately their clothing becomes tamei. I will say the clothing only becomes tamei when they leave Yerushalayim. So the Mishnah is just pointing out over here, you could have a situation where the 2 guys in front, their clothing becomes tamei because they just left Yerushalayim, and the 2 in back who have not yet left the city, their clothing does not yet become tamei. So we'll say even though they're all holding the same carbon, Tumah is dependent on departure from the city. So in that moment where the first 2 leave, their clothing is tamei. Second 2, the clothing is not yet tamei. Yatsu elu ve'elu metamin begadim. Once all 4 go out, then ultimately again they all have tumas begadim. Rabbi Shimon Omer, einon metamin ache yutza sa'ar beruban. Rabbi Shimon disagrees. He says no, they don't become tamei upon leaving the city. They only become tamei when the majority of the carcass of the animal is consumed by the flames. Nitach habasar, we'll say once the meat decomposes, or once the meat has been burnt sufficiently that it's no longer recognizable, we'll say then even if someone else is involved in the carbon, ultimately again their clothing will not become tamei. All right, we'll define those concepts a bit more in the Gemara. So we'll say now let's analyze this. Remember, what we're introduced to over here are these different places where carbonos were burnt. So apparently again, for the animals that are burnt whole, so if they were kosher, they were burnt in this place called Beis Hadeshen, which was outside of Yerushalayim. If these carbonos became invalid, they were burnt in this place called the Beis Habira. Where was the Beis Habira? Either in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash or somewhere on Harabayis. To which the Gemara says, my bira, what's the bira? There's a place in the Harabayis, and its name is Bira. Reish Lakish Amar, Kol Habayis Kulo Karui Bira. Reish Lakish says, no, but say, Rabbi Elchanan is saying Bira is actually a descriptive name for a specific location on the Harabayis. So the Beis Habira was a place on the Harabayis. Reish Lakish says, no. Bira is not the name of a place. Bira actually is a general name for the Beis HaMikdash. Shnei Amar, Ve'la Bira Asher Hachinosi. To the bira that I have prepared. I will say this is in Divrei Hayamim, right? To the Shlomo b'ni tein levav shayin lishma misazecha yidosecha v'chukecha b'asos hakol v'livnos habira asher hachinosi. David HaMelech David HaKadosh Baruch Hu, give my son Shlomo the ability to prepare or to build the bira that I have prepared. So you see, the Beis HaMikdash itself is called the bira. Therefore, Reish Lakish says bira just means that we burn the disqualified carbon somewhere in the Beis HaMikdash, whether that means in the Azara, on the Harabayis, on Rav Nachman, on Rav Baravua, Shlosha Beis Hadashanehin. Rav say so. Rav Nachman saying Rav Baravua, there are 3 we'll call Beis Hadashanin, 3 Beis Deshans. So the Gemara says Beis Hadeshan Gadol Haya Ba'azara. There was Rav saying now literally Beis Hadeshan literally means what? A house of ash, which means that halacha l'maisa, a place where you are burning things. So there are 3 of them, 3 locations. Beis Hadeshen Agad Haya Ba'azara. There was a large Beis Hadeshen in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash itself. Shesam Sorfen Psulei Kodshei Kadoshim. So we'll say that's where they would burn invalidated Kodshei Kadoshim, Ve'imurei Kodshim Kalim, and the limbs of Kodshim Kalim, Uparim Hanesrafim Usiirim Hanesrafim She'ira Ben Psul. Kodem Zrika. And I will say ultimately again, these parim and esrafim, these parim and these seirim, which normally burnt whole, if there was some type of psul, then you would burn it there. Kodem Zrika. If the psul occurred before Zrika. Ubeis hadeshin achar hayi b'harabayis. And there was another beis hadeshin which was on the harabayis. Shesham surfin parim and esrafim, usim and esrafim, shir ben psul achar Zrika. So I'll say this is actually very interesting because now what this Bryce is telling me, I will say, is as follows: that depending on when the psul occurred, will determine ultimately where the carbon is burned. So if the psul occurred before Zrika, it was burned inside the Beis Hamikdash, meaning in the Azara. If the psul occurred after Zrika, it was burned on the Harabayis. Ukimitzvasan chutz l'shalosh machanos. And I will say specifically for the Seirim and Seirim and Esrafim and Parim and Esrafim, when they were kosher offerings, then where were they burnt? They were burnt ultimately again outside of the Beis Hamikdash, what we call the Beis Hadesh and Chutz L'Yushalayim. Tani Levi. So we'll say Levi has a little bit of a different version of this. He also agrees. Shlosha Beis Hadashan and Hain. There are 3 different places we'll say where they used to burn karbanos. So remember again, this is let's see. Shane Beis Hadesh and Gadol Yibazar. Both said there was a large Beis Hadesh in the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. What would they burn there? Shesham Sarfin Psulei Kodshei Kadoshim. Ve'imuri kachim kalim. Both say it was there that they would burn ultimately again invalidated kachim kadoshim, the limbs of kachim kalim, uparim anisrafim, usir anisrafim, shira ben psuk bein kodem zrika bein la'achar zrika. As well say here's the major difference. So in Levi's version, they're burning invalidated psirim hanisrafim and parim hanisrafim in the Beis Hadeshin inside the courtyard. Ubeis Hadeshin achar haya b'harabayis. There was another Beis Hadeshin on the Harabayis outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Shesham sarfin bahen shesham sarfin parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim sheira ben psul biyitziasan. So I will say in that Beis Hadeshin on Harabayis, they would burn the invalidated parim and sirim hanisrafim that ultimately again were invalidated biyitziasan. But say Yitziasan ultimately means that they were taken out of the Beis Hamikdash before they were supposed to be taken out. Ukimitzvasan, and ultimately again when the par or the seir is done the way it's supposed to be done, chutz l'shalosh machanos. Ultimately again it's burned outside of Yerushalayim. So we'll say both Rabbi Baravua and Levi are both agreeing that there are 3 places where karbonos were burnt: a Beis Hadeshin in the Azara, a Beis Hadeshin on the Harabayis, and a Beis Hadeshin outside of Yerushalayim. What's the machlokes? The machlokes essentially is what's burnt where. That's the machlokes, specifically in the realm of parim hanisrafim and seirim hanisrafim. Good. By Rabbi Yirmiyah. Lina ma'usha tova parim hanisrafim. So we'll say this is an interesting shaila. Lina, we'll say, so what does lina mean? Lina means that if you leave over a carbon, you let it sit past its prescribed time. So says the Gemara, what is the halacha if does lina invalidate parim hanisrafim or siman hanisrafim? So we'll say now understand what's happening over here. So let's say again, you have to on a normal circumstance. Let's say you go ahead, you shecht an ola, and you go ahead and you do this rika, but you let let's say that the carbon sit overnight. So we'll say that's called lina, and that will invalidate a carbon. The question over here is as follows: what about parim hanisrafim usirim hanisrafim? We'll say what happens if you let those animals sit overnight? Ultimately, again, does it invalidate the carbon or not? Mi amrinan ki mahanya lina b'basar de barachila. So we'll say maybe we say when does lina invalidate a carbon? That's only when the carbon has an element of consumption. Aval hani dalav b'nei achila ninhu lo. But we'll say these carbonos ultimately again, which have no element of consumption. Remember, consumption by people or consumption on the mizbeach, there's no element of consumption, then maybe there's no din of lina. O dilma, or perhaps loshna, makes no difference. Amar Rava, hamil sibayli la'abayu pashatna le'meha. So we'll say this shaila, this Rava has said, this shaila was asked of Abai, does lina, so we'll say, understand what the Gemara is really asking over here. The Gemara is trying to figure out these parim hanisrafim and sirim hanisrafim, on one hand, are karbanos. On the other hand, are unique in that they are burnt outside of Yerushalayim, outside of the Beis Hamikdash. So also remember again, What happens if you take your olah, your chatas, and you burn it outside of the you burn it outside of the base of What happens? What happens? Not only is it puzzle, but it's a very, very, very serious infraction. Right? Shchutei chutz, we'll say, if you offer up karbanos, it's a very serious infraction, and yet here you have karbanos where you are mandated to go ahead and burn it outside of Yerushalayim. So now what we're trying to figure out is, okay, which elements of sacrificial law apply to these karbanos? So the Gemara says, this was asked of Abai, and he answered it. Meha, v'shavin, shinchishe ba'achilas parim ubisrei fasan, shelo asa klum. And I will say, and v'shavin means in the halacha is, or everyone agrees, shinchishe ba'achilas parim ubisrei fasan. And I will say, if you had an erroneous thought, ultimately again, with the consumption of parim ubisrei fasan, lo asa klum. So the Gemara says, meaning your thought is meaningless. What does this mean? My love, midmachshava la pasla, lina nami la pasla. And I will say, what this sounds like over here is that halacha lemaisa, if you had a machshavas pigul, right, something like that, by parmana sarvim, it does not invalidate the carbon. But say now, if machshava doesn't invalidate the carbon, the pashtos lina doesn't either. To which the Gemara says, well, maybe not. Machshava la pasla, aval lina pasla, maybe not. Maybe just again, there's no din of pigul. In other words, because ultimately, parmana sarvim will say don't have the same carbonic halachos. So therefore, an erroneous mindset will not invalidate the carbon. But that doesn't necessarily mean that lina won't invalidate the carbon. So tashma, paramana sarvim mo'olin bahen mishahuk yishu. So we'll say, now the Gemara said, ultimately again are subject to me'ilah as soon as they have been consecrated. Nishchatu, but once they were shechted, hochsheru li pasal b'tvuyom muchosher kippurim. We'll say once they're shechted, they can become pasal through contact with a tvuyom or a mechoser kippurim. Ubelina, and they can also become pasal through lina. My love, linas basar. But we're not talking about again that if you leave the actual carcass of the animal, the actual basar, inside the base of mikdash overnight, that the animal becomes invalid. Lo lina seimurin. No, we'll say when it says lina, what lina actually means, we'll say is remember, even in the case, or even in the situation of parim even in the situation of parim hanesrafim usiirim hanesrafim, even though they are burnt outside the base of mikdash, the emurin, there are still certain sacrificial parts that are burnt on the mizbeach inside the Beis HaMikdash. So when the Brisa says that lina will invalidate the carbon, perhaps it's not lina of the actual carcass of the animal, the body. Rather, what is it lina of? The sacrificial parts. To which the Gemara says, "V'hamid diktani seifa kulan molin b'hem Beis Hadeshen ad sheyusach habasar." Yet I will say we learned in the seifa. That's what it says, that the carbon itself is subject to me'ilah in the Beis Hadeshen until the meat decomposes. Mi the Seifa Basar, Reisha Nami Basar. Since the end of the Mishnah is talking about meat, I would assume the first part is also talking about meat, and therefore when it says lina, it's talking about lina of the meat. So you see from here that even Parim HaNesrafim and Sirim HaNesrafim are subject to lina, to which the Gemara says not necessarily. Mi de Irya Seifa Basar, Reisha Imurin. Who says it could be that the Seifa is talking about Basar, and ultimately again the Reisha is talking about Imur. And Tashma, the Tani Levi, Shira ben Psul b'Yitziyasan. So we'll say, what did we say before? Levi said that we're talking about a case where there was a psul that occurred to the Parman Asaf with Yitzia. What's Yitzia? My love, Lina. We'll say, is that not referring to Lina? In other words, when we say Yitzia, what it means is it wasn't taken out at the time it should have been taken out, i.e., it was left over in the Beis HaMikdash. To which the Gemara says, Lo, Psul Tuma or Psul Yitzia. Ultimately, we'll say it rather it refers to the psul of Tumah and the psul of Yitzia. So we'll say so the Gemara essentially does not resolve that particular question. The Gemara then goes into it. We will resolve it, but the Gemara asks another question. Tashma, the Tani Levi, Shira ben psul b'Yitziasan my love Lina. So we'll say so again. We're trying to figure it out still. So Levi said that there was a psul that occurred to the Parman Asarfim b'Yitzia. We'll say doesn't Yitzia? I'm sorry, by Rabbi Lazar. Yitzia Mahu Shetoil beParman Asarfim Sirin Asarfim. So we'll say the Gemara now asks a different question. What about Yitzia? So we'll say Yitzia means the taking out of the Parman Asarfim before Zrika. So remember again, what you begin to see over here is as follows. when you learn about, when the Gemara talks about the Parman Esrafim or Siman Esrafim, you would begin to think that it's just taken out whole and burnt whole without any sacrificial processes inside. It's not true. There are imurim, there are sacrificial parts that are burnt on the Mizbeach. Not only that, there's also zrika. There's zrika on the Mizbeach. What the Gemara now is going to ask is what happens if halacha lemaisa, the animal was taken out before the zrika. So you know what, we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up our discussion. But at least the takeaway from this that everybody agrees with so far is that what? Is that there are three places there are three places in which karbanos were burnt. Now karbanos are burnt for two different reasons. The primary reason karbanos are burnt is why? Because they become pasul. Right? I'm not talking about actual karbanos which are burnt on the mizbeach. We're talking about now three primary reasons that the base hadeshin was used. But the primary reason is because a carbon became pasul. The only exception to this rule is the Sirim Hanesrafim and the Parim Hanesrafim, whose avoda itself was to be burnt whole. Three different locations to burn karbanos. One inside the Azar of the Beis HaMikdash, one on the Harabayis, and one outside of Yerushalayim. The only items burned outside of Yerushalayim, both were what? For our purposes today, Parim Hanesrafim, Musir Hanesrafim. Now the truth is, there's also something else that's burned outside of the Beis HaMikdash. That's the Paraduma. But the Paraduma is its own separate entity. But again, so Parim Hanesrafim are burnt outside of Yerushalayim. Everything else either burnt in the Azara or on Harabai. So we'll pick up with this in Hashem tomorrow.